Chapter 8. 4th of July. Boom! Laura was jerked out of sleep. The bedroom was dark. Carrie asked in a thin, scared whisper, "What was that?" "Don't be scared," Laura answered. They listened. The window was hardly gray in the dark, but Laura could feel that the middle of the night was past. Boom! The air seemed to shake. "Great guns!" Pa exclaimed sleepily. "Why? Why?" Grace demanded. "Pa? Ma? Why?" Carrie asked, "Who is it? What are they shooting?" "What time is it?" Ma wanted to know. Through the partition, Pa answered, "It's the 4th of July, Carrie." The air shook again. Boom! It was not great guns. It was gunpowder exploded under the blacksmith's anvil in town. The noise was like the noise of the battles that the Americans fought for independence. 4th of July was the day when the first Americans declared that all men were born free and equal. Boom! "Come, girls, we might as well get up," Ma called. Pa sang, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?" "Charles," Ma protested, but she was laughing because it really was too dark to see. "It's nothing to be solemn about." Pa jumped out of bed. "Hooray, we're Americans," he sang. "Hooray, hooray, we'll sing the Jubilee. Hooray, hooray, the flag that sets men free." Even the sun, as it rose shining into the clearest of skies, seemed to know this day was the glorious 4th. At breakfast, Ma said, "This would be a perfect day for a 4th of July picnic." "Maybe the town will be far enough along to have one come next July," said Pa. "We couldn't hardly have a picnic this year anyway," Ma admitted. "It wouldn't seem like a picnic without fried chicken." After such a rousing beginning, the day did seem empty. Such a special day seemed to expect some special happening, but nothing special could happen. "I feel like dressing up," Carrie said, while they did the dishes. "So do I, but there's nothing to dress up for," Laura replied. When she carried out the dishwater to throw it far from the house, she saw Pa looking at the oats. They were growing thick and tall, gray-green and smoothly rippling in the wind. The corn was growing lustily, too. Its long, yellow-green, fluttering leaves almost hid the broken sod. In the garden, the cucumber vines were reaching out, their crawling tips uncurling beyond the patches of spreading big leaves. The rows of peas and beans were rounding up. The carrot rows were feathery green, and the beets were thrusting up long, dark leaves on red stems. The ground cherries were already small bushes. Through the wild grasses, the chickens were scattered, chasing insects to eat. All this was satisfaction enough for an ordinary day, but for the 4th of July there should be something more. Pa felt the same way. He had nothing to do, for on the 4th of July no work could be done except the chores and housework. In a little while he came into the house and said to Ma, "There's a kind of a celebration in town today. Would you like to go?" "What kind of a celebration?" Ma asked. "Well, mostly horse racing, but they took up a collection for lemonade," Pa replied. "Women are not likely to be at a horse race," Ma said, "and I couldn't go calling uninvited on the 4th of July." Laura and Carrie stood almost bursting with eagerness while Ma considered and shook her head. "You go along, Charles. It would be too much for Grace anyway." "It is much nicer at home," said Mary. Then Laura spoke up. "Oh, Pa, if you go, can't Carrie and I?" Pa's doubtful eyes brightened and twinkled at her and Carrie. Ma smiled on them. "Yes, Charles, it will be a nice outing for you all." She said, "Run down the cellar and bring up the butter, Carrie, and while you're dressing, I'll put up some bread and butter for you to take along." Suddenly the day seemed really 4th of July. Ma made sandwiches. Pa blacked his boots. Laura and Carrie hurriedly dressed up. Luckily, Laura's sprigged calico was freshly washed and ironed. She and Carrie took turns at the wash basin, scrubbing their faces and necks and ears pink. Over their unbleached muslin union suits, they put on crackling stiff petticoats of bleached muslin. They brushed and braided their hair. Laura wound her heavy braids around her head and pinned them. She tied the Sunday hair ribbon on the ends of Carrie's braids. Then she put on her fresh sprigged calico and buttoned it up the back. The full ruffle on the bottom of her full skirt came down to the tops of her shoes. "Please button me up," Carrie asked. In the middle of her back there were 2 buttons that she couldn't reach. She had buttoned all the others outside in. You can't wear your buttons turned inside at the 4th of July celebration, said Laura, unbuttoning them all and buttoning them again properly. If they're outside, they keep pulling my hair, Carrie protested. My braids catch on them. I know, mine always did, said Laura, but you just have to stand it till you're big enough to put your hair up. They put on their sunbonnets. Pa was waiting, holding a brown paper packet of sandwiches. Ma looked at them carefully and said, You look very nice. It's a treat to me to be stepping out with my two good-looking girls, said Pa. You look nice too, Pa, Laura told him. His boots were glossily polished, his beard was trimmed, and he was wearing his Sunday suit and broad-brimmed felt hat. I want to go, Grace demanded. Even when Ma said no, Grace, she repeated 2 or 3 times, I want to go. Because she was the baby, they had almost spoiled her. Now her unruliness must be nipped in the bud. Pa had to set her sternly in the chair and tell her, You heard your Ma speak. They set out soberly, unhappy about Grace, but she must be taught to mind. Perhaps next year she could go, if there were a big enough celebration and they all rode in the wagon. Now they were walking, to let the horses stay on their picket ropes and eat grass. Horses grow tired standing all day at hitching posts in dust and heat. Grace was too little to walk the mile and back, and she was too big to be carried. Even before they reached the town, they could hear a sound like corn popping. Carrie asked what it was, and Pa said it was firecrackers. Horses were tied along the whole length of Main Street. Men and boys were so thick on the sidewalk that in places they almost touched each other. Boys were throwing lighted firecrackers into the dusty street, where they sizzled and exploded. The noise was startling. I didn't know it would be like this, Carrie murmured. Laura did not like it either. They had never been in such a crowd before. There was nothing to do but keep walking up and down in it, and to be among so many strangers made them uncomfortable. Twice they walked the 2 blocks with Pa, and then Laura asked him if she and Carrie could not stay in his store building. Pa said that was a fine idea. They could watch the crowd while he circulated a little. Then they would eat their lunch and see the races. He let them into the empty building, and Laura shut the door. It was pleasant to be alone in the echoing bare place. They looked at the empty kitchen behind it where they had all lived huddled during the long, hard winter. They tiptoed upstairs to the hollow, hot bedrooms under the eaves of the shingled roof, and stood looking down from the front window at the crowd, and at the firecrackers squirming and popping in the dust. I wish we had some firecrackers, Carrie said. They're guns, Laura pretended. We're in Fort Ticonderoga, and those are British and Indians. We're Americans fighting for independence. It was the British in Fort Ticonderoga, and the Green Mountain Boys took it, Carrie objected. Then I guess we're with Daniel Boone in Kentucky. And this is a log stockade, said Laura. Only the British and Indians captured him, she had to admit. How much do firecrackers cost? Carrie asked. Even if Pa could afford them, it's foolish to spend money just to make a little noise, Laura said. Look at that little bay pony. Let's pick out the horses we'd like best. You could have first choice. There was so much to see that they could hardly believe it was noon when Pa's boots sounded downstairs and he called, Girls, where are you? They rushed down. He was having a good time. His eyes were twinkling bright. He sang out, I've brought us a treat. Smoked herring to go with our bread and butter. And look what else. He showed them a bunch of firecrackers. Oh, Pa, Carrie cried. How much did they cost? Didn't cost me a cent, said Pa. Lawyer Barnes handed them to me, said to give them to you girls. Why on earth did he do that? Laura asked. She had never heard of Lawyer Barnes before. Oh, he's going in for politics, I guess, said Pa. He acts that way, affable and agreeable to everybody. You want me to set these off for you now or after we eat? Laura and Carrie were thinking the same thing. They knew it when they looked at each other, and Carrie said it. Let's save them, Pa, to take home to Grace. All right, he said, and he put them in his pocket and undid the smoked herring while Laura opened the packet of sandwiches. The herring was delicious. They saved some to take home to Ma. When they had eaten the last bit of bread and butter, they went out to the well and drank long and deep from the edge of the pail that drew dripping up. Then they washed their hands, their hot faces, and dried them on Pa's handkerchief. It was time to go to the races. The whole crowd was moving across the railroad track and out on the prairie. On a pole set up there, the American flag fluttered against the sky. The sun was shining, and a cool breeze was blowing. Beside the flagpole, a man rose up tall above the crowd. He was standing on something. The sound of talking died down, and he could be heard speaking. "Well, boys," he said, "I'm not much good at public speaking, but today's the glorious 4th. This is the day and date when our forefathers cut loose from the despots of Europe. There wasn't many Americans at that time, but they wouldn't stand for any monarch tyrannizing over them. They had to fight the British regulars and their hired Hessians and the murdering, scalping, red-skinned savages that those fine gold-laced aristocrats turned loose on our settlements and paid for murdering and burning and scalping of women and children. A few barefoot Americans had to fight the whole of them and lick them. And they did fight them, and they did lick them. Yes, sir, we licked the British in 1776. We licked them again in 1812. And we backed all the monarchies of Europe out of Mexico and off this continent less than 20 years ago, by glory. Yes, sir, by old glory, right here, waving over my head. Anytime the despots of Europe try to step on Americans' toes, we'll lick 'em again." "Hurrah! Hooray!" everybody shouted. Laura and Carrie and Pa yelled too, "Hooray! Hooray!" "Well, so here we are today," the man went on. "Every man jack of us, a free and independent citizen of God's country, and the only country on earth where a man is free and independent. Today's the 4th of July, when this whole thing started, and it ought to have a bigger, better celebration than this. We can't do much this year. Most of us are out here trying to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But next year, likely some of us will be better off and able to chip in for a real big, rousing celebration of Independence Day. Meantime, here we are. It's the 4th of July, and on this day, somebody's got to read the Declaration of Independence. It looks like I'm elected, so hold your hats, boys. I'm going to read it." Laura and Carrie knew the Declaration by heart, of course, but it gave them a solemn, glorious feeling to hear the words. They took hold of hands and stood listening in the solemnly listening crowd. The stars and stripes were fluttering bright against the thin, clear blue overhead, and their minds were saying the words before their ears heard them. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station of which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with uncertain inalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Then came the long and terrible list of the crimes of the king. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states. He has obstructed the administration of justice. He has made judges dependent on his will alone. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to compensate the works of death, destruction, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty, perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from the allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full right to levy war. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. No one cheered. It was more like a moment to say, Amen, but no one knew what to do. Then Pa began to sing. All at once, everyone was singing. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God our King. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God our King. The crowd was scattering away then, but Laura stood stock still. Suddenly she had a completely new thought. The declaration and the song came together in her mind, and she thought, God is America's king. She thought, Americans won't obey any king on earth. Americans are free. That means they have to obey their own conscience. No king bosses Pa. He has to boss himself. Why, she thought, when I am a little older, Pa and Ma will stop telling me what to do, and there isn't anyone else who has the right to give me orders. I will have to make myself be good. Her whole mind seemed to be lighted up by that thought. This is what it means to be free. It means you have to be good. Our Father's God, author of liberty. The laws of nature and of nature's God endow you with a right to life and liberty. Then you have to keep the laws of God, for God's law is the only thing that gives you the right to be free. Laura had no time then to think any further. Carrie was wondering why she was so still, and Pa was saying, This way, girls, there's the free lemonade. The barrels stood in the grass by the flagpole. A few men were waiting for their turns to drink from the tin dipper. As each finished drinking, he handed the dipper on and then strolled away towards the horses and buggies by the racetrack. Laura and Carrie hung back a little, but the man who had the dipper saw them and handed the dipper to Pa. He filled it from the barrel and gave it to Carrie. The barrel was almost full, and slices of lemon floated thick on the lemonade. I see they put plenty of lemons in it, so it ought to be good, said Pa. While Carrie slowly drank, her eyes grew round with delight. She had never tasted lemonade before. They've just mixed it, one of the waiting men told Pa. The water is fresh from the hotel well, so it's cold. Another man who was waiting said, It depends some on how much sugar they put in it. Pa filled the dipper again and gave it to Laura. She had once tasted lemonade at Nellie Olson's party when she was a little girl in Minnesota. This lemonade was even more delicious. She drank the last drop from the dipper and thanked Pa. It would not be polite to ask for more. When Pa had drunk, they went across the trampled grass to the crowd by the racetrack. A great ring of sod had been broken, and the sod carried off. The breaking plow with its coulter had left the black earth smooth and level. In the middle of the ring and all around it, the prairie grasses were waving, except where men and buggies had made trampled tracks. Well, hello, Boast, Pa called, and Mr. Boast came through the crowd. He had just got to town in time for the races. Mrs. Boast, like Ma, had preferred to stay at home. 4 ponies came onto the track. There were 2 bay ponies, 1 gray and 1 black. The boys who were riding them lined them up in a straight row. Which'd you bet on if you were betting? Mr. Boast asked. Oh, the black one, Laura cried. The black pony's coat shone in the sunlight, and its long mane and tail blew silkily on the breeze. It tossed its slender head and picked up its feet daintily. At the word go, all the ponies leaped into a run. The crowd yelled, stretched out low and fast. The black pony went by, the others behind it. All their pounding feet raised a cloud of dust that hid them. Then around the far side of the track they went, running with all their might. The gray pony crept up beside the black. Neck and neck they were running when the gray pulled a little ahead and the crowd yelled again. Laura still hoped for the black. It was doing its best. Little by little it gained on the gray. Its head passed the gray's neck. Its outstretched nose was almost even with the gray's nose. Suddenly all 4 ponies were coming head on down the track, quickly growing larger and larger in the front of the oncoming dust. The bay pony with its white nose came skimming past the black and the gray, across the line ahead of them both, while the crowd cheered. If you'd have bet on the black, Laura, you'd have lost, Pa said. It's the prettiest, though, Laura answered. She had never been so excited. Carrie's eyes shone. Her cheeks were pink with excitement. Her braid was snared on a button, and recklessly she yanked it loose. Are there any more, Pa? More races? Carrie cried. Sure. Here they come for the buggy race, Pa answered. Mr. Boast joked. Pick the winning team, Laura. Through the crowd and out onto the track came first a bay team hitched to its light buggy. The bays were perfectly matched, and they stepped as though the buggy weighed nothing at all. Then came other teams, other buggies, but Laura hardly saw them, for there was a team of brown horses that she knew. She knew their proud, gay heads and arching necks, the shine of light on their satiny shoulders, the black manes blowing, and the forelocks tossing above their quick, bright, gentle eyes. Oh, look, Carrie, look, it's the Brown Morgans, she cried. That's Almanzo Wilder's team, Boast, said Pa. What in creation has he got them hitched to? High up above the horses, Almanzo Wilder was sitting. His hat was pushed back on his head, and he looked cheerful and confident. He turned the team towards its place in line, and they saw that he was sitting on a high seat on top of a long, high, heavy wagon with a door in its side. It's his brother Royal's peddler's wagon, said a man standing nearby. He don't have a chance with that weight against all those light buggies, said another. Everyone was looking at the Morgans and the wagon and talking about them. The off-horse Prince is the one he drove last winter at the 40-mile trip that he and Cap Garland made and brought in the wheat that kept us all from starving to death, Pa told Mr. Boast. The other one's Lady, that ran off with the antelope herd that time. They've both got good action and speed. I see that, Mr. Boast agreed, but no team can haul that heavy cart and beat Sam Owens Bays on his light buggy. Seems like the young fellow might have rousted out a buggy somewheres in this country. He's an independent kind of young cuss, someone said. He'd rather lose with what he's got than win with a borrowed buggy. Too bad he don't own a buggy, Mr. Boast said. The brown horses were by far the most beautiful on the track, and so proud. They did not seem to mind the heavy wagon at all, but tossed their heads, pricked their ears, lifted their feet as if the ground were not quite good enough for them to step on. Oh, what a shame! What a shame they haven't a fair chance, Laura was thinking. Her hands were clenched. She wished so much that those proud, fine horses might only have a fair chance. Hitched to that heavy wagon, they could not win. She cried out, "Oh, it isn't fair!" The race started. Fast came the bays, leading all the others. The shining legs trotted up, and the wheels whirling hardly seemed to touch the ground. Every buggy rushing by was a light one-seated buggy. Not a team drew even the weight of a two-seated buggy, except the beautiful brown horses who came last, pulling the high, heavy peddler's cart. Best team in the country, Laura heard a man say, but not a chance. Nope, said another. That wagon's too heavy for them to pull. Sure as shooting, they'll break their trot. But they were pulling it, and they were trotting, evenly, without a break. The 8 brown legs kept moving in a perfect trot. The dust cloud rose up and hid them. Then bursting out of it, up the other side of the track, the teams and buggies were speeding. 1 buggy, no, 2 buggies. They were behind the peddler's cart. 3 buggies were behind it. Only the bays were ahead of it. Oh, come on, win, win, Laura was begging the brown horses. She so wanted them to trot faster that it seemed her wishing was pulling them. They were almost around the track. They were coming now around the turn and on toward the line. The bays were ahead. The Morgans could not do it. They could not win. The weight was too much for them. But still Laura kept on wishing with all of her. Faster, faster, only a little faster. Oh, come on, come on! Almanzo leaned forward from the high seat and seemed to speak to them. Still smoothly trotting, they came faster. Their heads reached Mr. Owen's buggy and slowly, smoothly crept by it. All the legs were moving fast, fast, while slowly the brown heads came up, even with the bays. All 4 horses were coming now in a line, faster, faster. A tie, by gosh, it's a tie, a man said. Then Mr. Owen's buggy whip flashed out. It swished down once, twice, as he shouted. The bays leaped ahead. Almanzo had no whip. He was leaning forward, lightly holding the reins firm. Once more he seemed to speak. Fast and smooth, as swallows flying, the brown Morgans passed the bays and crossed the line. They had won. The whole crowd shouted. It surged to surround the brown horses and Almanzo high on the cart. Laura found that she had been holding her breath. Her knees were wobbly. She wanted to yell and to laugh and to cry and to sit down and rest. Oh, they won! They won! They won! Carrie kept saying, clapping her hands. Laura did not say anything. He earned that $5, said Mr. Boast. What $5? Carrie asked. Some men in town put up $5 for the best trotting team, Pa exclaimed. Almanzo Wilder's won it. Laura was glad she had not known. She could not have borne it if she had known that the brown horses were running for a $5 prize. He has it coming to him, said Pa. That young man knows how to handle horses. There were no more races. There was nothing more to do but stand around and listen to the talking. The lemonade was low in the barrel. Mr. Boast brought Laura and Carrie a dipperful, and they divided it. It was sweeter than before, but not so cold. The teams and buggies were going away. Then Pa came from the dwindling crowd and said it was time to go home. Mr. Boast walked with them along Main Street. Pa said to him that the Wilders had a sister who was schoolteacher back east in Minnesota. She's taken a claim half-mile west of town here, said Pa, and she wants Almanzo to find out if she can get this school to teach next winter. I told her to tell him to send in her application to the school board. Other things being equal, I don't know why she can't as well have it. Laura and Carrie looked at each other. Pa was on the school board, and no doubt the others would feel as he did. Laura thought, maybe if I'm a good scholar and she likes me, maybe she might take me driving behind those beautiful horses.